Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second part of our workshop together on gender equality and global capital markets, together with our partners from IFC, UN Women, and our gracious hosts, the Nairobi Securities Exchange, that's brought you all together today for this workshop. Now, we appreciate everyone coming back from part one. Hopefully you've had time to reflect a little bit about what we discussed last time on Monday. And as we learned a little bit about the IFC and their work in this area and some of the research they're having, and as our main partner in this event, we're really pleased to have with us today from the IFC, Rose Lumumba, who is the corporate governance specialist at IFC, covering your region. Rose, thanks for joining us again for one of these workshops. We really appreciate our partnership, and I'd love to pass to you to give us some opening remarks to kick this session off.
Thank you, Tiffany. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear and we see you great.
All right. Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here to join all the participants in the training. And as you've just mentioned, really, we are very excited from the IFC to push the gender equality button and just ensure that we are all represented. Both male and female have got equitable chances to participate in the workspace. So really welcoming everybody to the session today, and to thank you, the representatives from the UNSSE, for inviting me to deliver these opening remarks, and also the Nairobi Securities Exchange for hosting this very important event. Advancing gender equality and advocating for the SDG 5 is central to our development and mandate at the International Finance Corporation. It is actually entrenched in our approach to sustainability. We are proud to team up with the UNSSE, stock exchanges, and global partners to promote gender equality, because this is part of our training at the IFC on women on boards and women in business and women in leadership program. This program benefits from the support of the government of Luxembourg, and it aims to empower women leaders and to break down barriers to boardroom and entry to top leadership in emerging markets and developing countries. Why are all these people interested in this very important agenda of promoting gender equality? It is because the business case for gender equality has never been more clear and necessary than at the present time. As we will cover during the workshop today, there is plenty of evidence, including research that has been done by the IFC and many other organizations, that companies with enhanced ESG practices perform better on critical business indicators when they have got gender balance. The IFC's research has also demonstrated how the presence of women in leadership boosts good leadership, boosts good ESG performance, and there's also evidence that in emerging markets, the role of women really, when they are in top leadership, enhances good focus on climate action. A study by the International Bank for Settlements among around 2,000 listed companies showed that a 1% increase in female managers at the top is correlated to an increment of a percentage or half a percentage in carbon, a decrease of half a percentage in carbon emissions. This year, IFC surveyed around 600 companies, mostly from emerging markets and developing economies, to analyze the practices of the nexus of climate governance and gender equality and propose concrete actions towards the gender inclusive climate action. But with all this development, we know that women are still underrepresented, and really the progress we are making is somewhat slow. And we need the participation of everyone, the participation of women, the participation of men, the participation of investors, participation of policymakers, and even issuers and listed companies to make a lasting difference. We at the IFC also keep on taking a hard look at our organization within and also on the investments and the companies that we invest in. And on that, a little over 10 years ago, the IFC actually looked at the gender diversity among the directors it nominates to sit on its boards in investee companies. And the findings that we had were very sobering. It was only at 20% of nominee directors to our investee clients that were women. I am pleased to announce today that due to very concerted efforts that have been made over the last 10 years, we now are over 50% representation of women in our our investee companies. So today's workshop is an example of our wonderful collaboration with the UNSSE, as well as, of course, the Nairobi Securities Exchange and UN Women and other like-minded partners who we in the region partner on several initiatives. I am sure that you are well aware of. For example, the Ring the Bell event for gender equality that we do every 8th of March of each year. And of course, that really speaks about how committed we are to ensuring that there is gender equality in our companies in the region. But today's event will guide participants through the complexities of gender equality in capital markets. And of course, the various modules that will be delivered will really be giving information on how we can enhance our gender balance, especially in our market, as well as in our region. So IFC is very pleased to support these efforts that translate to an even stronger commitment to promote gender equality and turn that commitment to action. I wish you a good workshop and impactful one, and may you enjoy yourselves, and please participate as much as you can. The faculty is ready for any question that you may have, and they will be happy to answer and also respond to your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rose. And as always, we appreciate the partnership. If anyone would like to work with the IFC or get more support from the IFC, we do share their contact details at the end of this session. Rose has another meeting she has to join today, so she won't be able to stay the whole session. But if you have any questions for her, we can be sure to pass those on to Rose and the team at IFC. Thanks so much for joining us, Rose. Now, as you mentioned, we would like to get some interactivity today. So remember yesterday, we were really setting the scene of what is the complexity we talk about around gender equality. And today, we really want to look at how you can start kind of weeding through that complexity through implementation and communication. Now, in order to interact with you, you might remember from last time, we have a few different tools we're going to use. So one of those tools is that Q&A box. So we use this, I'd say maybe sparingly last time, but just as a reminder to everyone, that chat box can sometimes, we can lose questions in it because a few people are giving comments or we're sharing documents or resources in the chat. So if you put your question in the Q&A box, it doesn't go anywhere until we answer it. So as Rose said, we're here and we're eager to answer your questions and have discussions with you. So if you have any questions, we do urge you, please put that in the Q&A box to make sure that we are able to address that. Now, as a reminder, we have 2 hours together today. So that brings our total course to 4 hours. We had 2 hours together on Monday. We'll have another 2 hours today. So you have 2 full hours to ask us any of the questions that you might have. And we do expect you to participate, not only asking questions, but also, as many of you did very well last time, to participate in our Zoom polls and our Menti questions that we're going to share with you. Now, to reward you for that participation, of course, we will give you a certificate. We do just ask that you fill in a feedback survey. So we're going to share the link to that feedback survey at the end of today's session. And if you fill in that feedback survey, we will then send you a certificate within 5 business days. So you can expect that in less than 5 business days. Now, just as a introduction to everyone who's here, you may not remember me because I wasn't facilitating your last session. My name's Tiffany Grabsky. I'm very pleased to be with you for this session today, and I lead the SSE Academy. And you probably recognize Fiona, who was facilitating your session last time on Monday. Fiona, thanks so much for coming back for this session. Fiona is a training officer and an expert on a number of topics we're talking about today. So we'll be guiding you through a lot of the content today, but not single or double-handedly, I guess. We're very pleased to be joined with a number of top experts on this topic. First of which is Esther Yongo, who is from the Women Economic Empowerment division, I guess, at the UN Women's Kenya Country Office. Esther, thanks so much for joining us from UN Women, and Esther's going to continue on what we heard from Elizabeth last time about the UN Women Empowerment Principles. So if you had any questions about those WEPs from last time, please take advantage of us having Esther with us today. Now, we're also very pleased to have some guest speakers with us today. I see Paul's already joined. Paul, thanks for joining us today. Paul's coming from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and he's a sustainable finance manager. And he's going to talk to us about how gender equality is linked to the bond arena. So listed bonds we're going to talk about, and in particular how gender equality and bonds can be brought together. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we're going to have with us from Brightmine, Sweta Viswanathan, who is a global product specialist. And Sweta is going to talk to us today about the gender pay gap, another important topic that we didn't quite bridge yesterday, but we may have, or Monday, but we may have mentioned a few times. So very pleased to have all these great experts with us today. As I said, take advantage of having these experts on the call with you live, and feel free to ask any questions you might have. Now, you might remember this little wheel from our last session. We covered last time 2 parts of it. The first 2, we looked at prepare and align. Now, that was really setting the scene, helping us understand kind of what's the context, what's happening, and how do we start to look at different global, local, and peer practices that we can use to get us on the right track moving forward. Now we're going to dive a bit more into that implementation and communication. And so implementation, we're going to look at capturing value through gender lens market, promotion, and products. And then in communication, we're going to look at what this might look like in your public disclosures. Now, to cover these 2 modules, we hope to achieve 2 big objectives together. The first is that we aimed today in these 2 hours to help you to understand how to capture market value for gender equality performance. We talked about how important that performance was last time, but we want to make sure you get the most out of what you're doing. And our second objective today is to help you to identify what communication channels you can use for gender-related information. And to achieve those objectives in these 2 hours, you can see a brief look at our agenda there. Not too dissimilar from last time. We will have a 5-minute break around the halfway point. And we'll have guest speakers throughout that as well. So we'll have quite a bit of a shift in voices today. Hopefully keep everyone really engaged throughout the session. Now, to kick us off, we're going to do a Menti together. So you might remember from last time, you only have to log into this Menti once, and then when we come back to it, it'll be in the same Menti. So if you keep this open somewhere on your screen, then we'll be able to come back to it with other questions we have. But we want to know, just like last time, how much you already know. So my colleague Fiona is just sharing her screen here so that you can see the Menti. Thanks so much, Fiona. And you can use that QR code on the top right-hand corner there to access the Menti, or you can use the link that Fiona has put in the chat. Or alternatively, you can just type into a web browser, www.menti.com, and you can use that code that you can see at the top of your screen. So the code is 34042534. And we'll give you all a moment to log into that. If you're having any trouble logging in, then please just let us know. We'd love to know what obstacles you might be facing so that we can help you to overcome them so that you can interact with us. So I'll give you just a minute there to log into that Menti. We see a few of you are managing. That's great. And a very diverse response we're getting. Everyone's kind of all over the map here, which is good. We have a very diverse audience then in terms of our expertise on this topic. I'll let a few more of you provide your thoughts. Okay. So we often seem to settle in around the middle somewhere, but it's really interesting to see that there's actually quite a few of you who are quite uncomfortable with these topics, and maybe one or two of you that are very comfortable, at least with the first two. So the first one was identifying the value that gender equality can add to investment strategies. There's a few of you in the middle that feel like you're, semi-confident in this. But also a few of you that have no knowledge or expertise on this at all. Then we also see communicating gender-related information to investors. So that likely has to do with what role you have in the organization and whether you do communicate anything to investors. But those of you who are involved in any sort of communications from your organization that investors might be using or might have access to, this unit will be particularly helpful to you. And then finally, we see explaining to colleagues the financial value of gender equality. Now, we did introduce this a little bit last time when we were talking about both the human rights case and the business case to gender equality. We did discuss a lot of the financial benefits that we might see. So we'll dive a bit deeper into that today and see why financial markets are already so interested in gender equality. So that's great to see. Maybe Fiona, I think we have one more. Yeah, let's move to the next Menti. Great. So we're going to ask you a quiz question now. So before we do a bit of a review of our last session on Monday, we want to get an idea of what you remember. Now, one of the main topics we were talking about is the language. So what is it that we want to, what is it we want to do with gender equality? Now, we had two terms that were very similar and can be quite tricky. So we're going to test you on these two terms. I think we're probably good, Fiona. We can start the game now. Great. So if you haven't logged in, log in quick. The game's about to start. Great. So you have 30 seconds to answer the question. And the question is the objective, and remember we were talking about something that is acronymed as DEI, and D, E, and I were all used to achieve the final objective, which is equity or equality. And I'll let you take the last few seconds to guess. Okay. Oh, an almost even split. Oh, an exactly even split. Okay, so that's very fair. Well done, everyone. The answer actually is equality, but these two terms often are interchanged. So what we want to remember is not necessarily which term is correct, but what we mean by equity and why that needs to come with diversity and inclusion. So I think to review that, I'm going to come back to our slide deck. Just give me 2 seconds here. Great. So you should see now appearing on your screen the slides again. And we're going to come back to this image here that represented DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, as a reminder, when we were talking about diversity, we were discussing this as ensuring that multiple identities are being represented. So this can include sex or gender or culture, race and ethnicity, religion, age, disability, etc. So when we were talking about diversity, we were using just going to see if I can move. There we go. We were talking about having seats at a table. So if we were talking just about boardrooms, which of course we're not just talking about boardrooms, but if we were using that as an analogy, then diversity would be, what are the seats at the table that we have? We want to have, each seat filled with people with different perspectives and bringing different skill sets to that table. Next, let's look at equity. And equity was where we were discussing recognizing and reorganizing power distribution. So equity is sort of like having a microphone. It's not just having a seat at the table, but also being able to speak at that table at the same level as everybody else. So it's, taking away that some people have a quiet voice and some people have a very loud voice. We can hear everybody at the same level. And then finally, we have inclusion. Now, remember, it's not enough to have just two of these, because then we can have different issues pop up, as you can see in those overlaps. So we can have oversaturation, we can have deferral to dominant groups, or we can have cultural assimilation. So we really want to also have inclusion. And for inclusion, this is ensuring that every individual feels welcomed and giving them equal opportunity to connect, belong, and grow, and to contribute to the organization, advance their careers, and feel comfortable and confident in being their true, authentic self. So it's not enough, just to have a bunch of people represented at the table and to make sure that they all have the same microphone and they can all be heard the same. But we also need to all listen to what they're saying and respect what's being said and take into account what's being said by everyone at the table. So that's how we get to our full DEI, which equals equality. Now, I also just want to do a quick review here of the impact that we were talking about. Now, I said we're going to build on this today. So just as a reminder, we learned that improving gender equality does provide many benefits to society and to the economy beyond just the boardroom and corporate environment. So for example, we saw that studies have shown that gender equality can decrease violence in society, that it can increase economic productivity, and it can also increase resilience against financial and environmental crises, which Rose was also sharing with us from some IFC stats earlier. Now, just as a reminder, what we did not say is that women are causing all of this, but rather it's that diversity and equality that we were working towards that can have this impact. Now, let's also remember that increasing equality in corporate leadership also has been found to create important benefits to an organization, such as increase in profits, increased transparency, and again, improved environmental impacts. Now, with that basis, we also then discussed, okay, how do we move forward? How do we capture these benefits? And a good kind of starting point that we talked about was using the women's empowerment principles from the UN. And we shared with you how you can use these principles to get started on enhancing gender equality. As a reminder, the 7th principle, measurement and reporting, was highlighted as one of the key principles, and it's something we'll be discussing in quite a bit of detail today when we discuss public disclosures. But also we'll be looking at internal communication as well, and we'll be using the WEPs to go back to that as well. Now, we didn't quite have enough time to review corporate culture last time. This is a really useful slide, I think, as you're getting started. This came at the end of that exercise of Owl Inc. and Peacock PLC. And as a reminder, in that exercise, we found that corporate culture played a really important role in making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. However good the intentions are, if we don't take into consideration the corporate culture and the barriers that are preventing improved equality, then we won't actually achieve the objectives and we'll actually end up wasting money or wasting our time or even making it worse. So a few actions that you can take into consider here. First is providing gender sensitivity training for HR staff and managers to ensure fair recruitment processes and enhancing diversity. Also, maybe investigating policies aimed at providing equal opportunities for advancement that enhance equity for employees. Also doing research to identify those barriers, such as external gender pay gap reports, which we'll hear about later today, and to enhance the inclusion within your organization. And of course, this all requires effective communication from the top to institutionalize the desired corporate culture. So with that, let's dive into today's units. So as a reminder, we're going to look at the implement and the communication. And to kick us off with the implement unit, I'm going to pass to my colleague, Fiona. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks so much, Tiffany, for that great recap on where we got to. So as Tiffany mentioned, we're now moving into the new content for today's session. And so starting with implementation, we're going to be looking at the products that support market action. And we'll also look at the mechanisms that add value and provide and promote gender equality in the markets. So we'll first look at how financial products are being used to support gender equality and what opportunities lie within those financing mechanisms for gender-allied companies. So to get started, we will look at the trends we're seeing in sustainable finance more broadly. So this chart, which you can find, is from the 2022 UNCTAD World Investment Report that shows that and Tiffany's just shared the link to the latest report in the chat as well. But in the 2022 report, we saw that the total number of sustainability-themed funds worldwide had increased, although the rate of growth had slowed a little from 2021. And the total now stands at over 7,000 funds, up 18% from 2021, with these funds worth around $2.5 trillion US. So we do see in 2022 a decrease in global net investment flows to sustainable funds, but it is important to note that this is a decline as a result of depressed asset values and investor withdrawals amid some of those persistent market uncertainties that we're probably familiar with from that time, including inflation, COVID, poor market returns, etc., and recession risk. However, this growing trend of sustainable investment is certainly set to continue and to increase. And we are also seeing a significant growth in gender lens investing in its own right as well. But the data on gender lens investing is a little bit more difficult to measure than more general sustainable funds. So we do have a little bit less of a clear idea on the exact magnitude of funds that consider gender factors. So whilst we can't really dive into this topic in full today, we've provided a few extra slides that you'll be able to find in the handout materials on the webpage. So if this is something you want to look at a little bit further, please do take a look at those after the workshop. And Tiffany's reshared the link again to those for you in the chat. And here we also just see a little recap on those further levels of investment growth. And I think these are the slides that you can look at in your own time. So what is gender lens investing? That might, of course, be the first starting point that you ask yourself. So, of course, it's great to get clear on what we mean by this term to begin with. So we'll move on to giving you our view on a definition that could work. But before we do so, we'd love to take a moment to discuss that and to get your thoughts on what that term means to you. So it would be great if you could just take a second, have a little think about what comes to mind for you on gender lens investing and what that means, and share with us your thoughts in the chat. So I'll just give you a little moment to have a think about that, but please do share what you think that means. And as we've said already, we really do encourage your participation. So please do share with us, even if you haven't got a fully polished definition, just share any keywords that it brings to mind. And as Tiffany's mentioned as well, if you'd prefer to share anonymously, you can select to input your response anonymously through the Q&A. But yeah, any initial definitions, any key thoughts? Great. So we've heard a few responses here. So Pamela says, giving loans that are gender specific. Justus says, investing in activities that promote gender inclusivity. Sappho says, directing capital towards products and investment vehicles that positively impact the lives of women. And Linda says, investing that focuses on equality, and empowerment. And then we have investing towards inclusivity of all genders. Investing, focusing, yep. Investing with women in mind and their challenges in creating wealth, creating products that are women-focused. Great. Thank you, everyone. I think there's some really good thoughts in there. And I see we have an answer for Q&A as well around looking at the impact of investment from a gender lens, directing funds in investment that generate positive social impact by supporting women's engagement in business and the economy. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for sharing those thoughts. I think you've captured a lot of the key concepts there that we would say are part of that definition. So let's move on to have a little look at that definition now. But I think, you know, you're really along the right lines there already, which is great to see. So we draw from the Global Impact Investing Network for our definition here, and they define gender lens investing as investment strategies applied to an allocation or to the entirety of an investment portfolio, which seek to examine gender dynamics to better inform investment decisions and or intentionally and measurably address gender disparities. So as the name gender lens investing makes clear, gender is a lens, a way of seeing that helps investors to highlight opportunity, illuminate risk, and understand strategy in a more nuanced way. So I think that speaks to a lot of the points that you guys have made, that the investment is about driving action towards equality, but actually doing so in a way that is, makes sense as an investment strategy fundamentally too. Brilliant, and thank you all for sharing those thoughts. It's really helpful just to get your ideas as well. Okay, so now we've established what we mean by gender lens investing. Let's look at a few particular strategies that investors are using to apply that gender lens to their investment decisions. And there are many different strategies that they could use here. So some of the core strategies we see look specifically at what focus an investment strategy with a gender lens takes. Often we'll see a combination of multiple or all of these strategies to varying degrees. And the most common strategy you might be familiar with is a focus on leadership. But other areas that we see investment strategies focusing on also include employees, supply chains, products and services, and community. And at the firm level, fund managers can drive the adoption of gender lens or gender smart investing by starting with their own investment house. Fund managers can strengthen their gender diversity on their own teams, for example, by setting leadership clear targets or building a respectful workplace culture, or indeed making public commitments to gender diversity as well. And the IFC have developed a framework that we link to in this slide that includes various actions such as to design a strategy, to engage, train and reward people in the firm, to enhance investment processes and systems, and identify and collaborate with partners and stakeholders. So I'd recommend checking out the link you see in the slide there if you'd like to know more about that. So then if we're thinking about how investors act for their portfolios, fund managers can adopt strategies in both origination and portfolio management. And these strategies can enable fund managers to allocate capital to companies that are committed to these different areas that we see on the screen. So really making sure that they're setting those targets within their portfolio and directing capital towards organizations taking progress and making steps on those issues. So the good news is that the benefits of gender diversity have become more widely recognized. Investor demand for gender smart investment opportunities has increased considerably. And so this has led to the emergence of a variety of gender-focused financial products. So to give you a brief overview, let's have a look at some of those investment types. So on the left side, we have a few buckets of financial products that can be used to direct financial flows towards gender equality. So for example, we have equity-based products, debt or fixed income, and also gender lens funds as well. And then on the right-hand side, we can see that investors accessing these financial products can also vary. So we have both retail or individual investors and institutional investors making use of these financial vehicles. And that distinction can be quite important to recognize because the needs and expectations of those different investor groups will vary as well, which can lead to a diversity of different financial products to meet those needs. So let's have a look at a couple of quick examples of how this might work in practice with some products that have been available. So this first example builds on what we talked about earlier in the week regarding climate and gender and how those benefits can actually coexist. So this example comes from the Gold Standard, which is an organization that works to reduce carbon emissions by offering projects that feature the highest level of environmental integrity and also support sustainable development. And in particular, the project from the Gold Standard we're looking at here is the Lango Safe Water Project in Uganda. And so this project has been certified as the first ever Gold Standard gender responsive project in 2020. And the project itself works to rehabilitate boreholes to provide clean water in rural Uganda. And actually, what we've seen through this project is that we have both delivered significant carbon savings, but also promoted much greater access to clean water for the recipients of this project. And in turn, that access to clean water can reduce waterborne disease, and it can buy back significant time for households to reduce their water collection needs. And most of the time that we save through that is time that women and girls would have spent doing those tasks. So as a result, we're seeing less school absenteeism through not having to collect that water and not having to suffer from waterborne diseases as well. And it's great to see with this project as well that impact in terms of gender goes beyond just that direct impact. So actually the local water resources committee now is at near parity in terms of female and male representation. And actually even incidences of domestic violence related to water collection had dropped. And actually this time that had been saved through not having to collect water was also allowing women to participate more fully in other household activities, as well as also income generating activities and increasing their leisure time. So this is a really interesting project, and also kind of shows that both on the mandatory side, the Gold Standard can set a certain level of requirements on gender sensitivity, but actually they have also set this higher bar in terms of gender responsive projects, which requires a deeper focus on setting goals and targets. So that's one example. We have a second example, which I won't go through in the interests of time, but I'll leave it with you in the handout materials to follow the source to look at the second project around a dual benefit bond in Turkey as well. And another one from the IFC along similar lines, which I'd encourage you to have a look at separately. Great. So I think that moves us on now to hand back to Tiffany.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Now, those case studies you just saw are super interesting, so please feel free to access those in your handout. And I also added in the chat there a link to the IFC's webpage on IFC Banking on Women, and they have a number of case studies there too. Now, we wanted to focus today a little bit more on those bonds that we were talking about. Because we're a little short on time just at the moment, I wanted to make sure we get to our guest speaker. So I'll also encourage you to look at these slides in your own time. And just to highlight that Paul's going to be talking in detail what we mean by a gender bond. Does that exist? What is it really doing? Where does it sit within the bond pool? And if you want to learn more about kind of this increase we're seeing in the interest in thematic bonds and social bonds more particularly, you can again come back to the UNCTAD World Investment Forum and a number of the resources that Paul's going to share with you today too. We also got asked in the Q&A about how to learn more, what kind of educational resources there are on gender lens investing. Now, the Luxembourg Stock Exchange provides a lot of resources on on that. So maybe Paul can share a little bit too about what they offer at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. And at the very end of this slide deck that you'll have in your handout, you'll also be able to find more information on additional resources you might want, particularly pertaining to this unit. So I encourage you to make use of that. And two other publications we really highlight in when we're talking about bonds is, of course, the Social Bond Principles and the Climate Bonds Initiative Social and Sustainability Bond Methodology. Now, because we have with us an expert here today who can share exactly, what it means to list a bond and what are these gender bonds and how they're seeing it in their market, I'd love to pass directly to Paul. Paul, thanks so much for joining us. As a reminder, Paul's a sustainable finance manager at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. And he's got a great presentation for you today on gender-linked bonds. So I'll pass over to you, Paul. And just so you know, I have the video up and ready. So maybe when you get to the video point, I can share that for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I'm very happy being again invited to participate in those wonderful sessions that you're organizing with different stock exchanges around the world. So as Tiffany said, my name is Paul Shaheen, and I work at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and more precisely at the Luxembourg Green Exchange. So some of you might have heard of us. And I'm here today actually to talk to you about a very interesting topic, which is gender bonds or gender-focused bonds. I will be sharing my slides right away, and we will start discussing this. I see that I'm at the end of my slides already. So as Tiffany said, maybe one of the topics that we would like to highlight today is what are gender bonds? Do they exist actually or not? For the ones of you who might be active in the debt side of the market and mainly the sustainable or the thematic bonds, you know very well that we have officially 4 types of debt instruments that contribute actually to green, to social, to sustainability in general. And these are the green, social, sustainability bonds, and these are the use of proceeds bonds. And we have a non-use of proceed bond instrument, which is the sustainability linked bond. These are the main 4 actually official instruments in the market. Official in the terms of having their own principles, having their own standards, the reporting requirements, etc. And under these instruments, I'm sure that you have heard about a lot of different nominations, different names. I'm sure you have heard about blue bond, you have heard about gender bond, you have heard about SDG bond, you have heard about climate neutral bond, etc., etc. And all of these names maybe needs a little bit of thinking in order to put them under one of these main 4 instruments in the market. And this is exactly the case of gender bonds or the gender-focused bonds. Gender bonds or gender-focused bonds do not exist officially as a separate category with its own principles or standards in the market. It's seen by so many actors in the market, including ourselves, but also ICMA, so ICMA, or other stakeholders who are active in this field as a sub-theme of social bonds, sustainability bonds, and sustainability-linked bonds. And this is why we don't have in the market dedicated, let's say, principles coming out from ICMA, similar to what we have for the green and for the social and for the sustainability ones. Now, issuers of these type of instruments, so for gender bonds or gender-focused bonds, when they would like to issue an instrument and dedicate maybe 100% of the proceeds or part of the proceeds to gender-related projects, they look at the social bond principles and sometimes also to the sustainability bond guidelines, because for them, and for, as I said, most of the stakeholders in the market, the gender bonds are sub-theme of the social and sustainability bonds. So they follow what we call the principles that already exist for social and sustainability bonds. Now, having said that, so having said that we don't have dedicated principles for this, between brackets, I use the term category, but please remember, it's not a category, it's not officially there. Some other stakeholders in the market said, but wait, we see some interest in the market from both issuers and investors actually in issuing dedicated instruments to finance dedicated gender-related projects, and for investors to invest in those instruments. So maybe we need some extra guidelines in the market to help both sides, investors and issuers, to better understand how to deal with these instruments, while at the same time following the principles of ICMA when it comes to social and sustainability bonds. And one of these guidelines, very famous ones, is this very interesting document that you see on the slide that was issued by IFC, ICMA, and UN Women. It's only guidelines actually to explain more what do we mean by gender bonds, what type of project we can finance under an instrument that can be qualified as a gender bond, how issuers, as I said, and how investors can benefit from this instrument. And this document is one of the main documents that issuers of gender bonds or gender-focused bonds refer to when they tap into this market. Now, as I said, I mentioned that we have in the market these two instruments, or two let's say, families or two types of instruments under the thematic bonds, the use of proceeds and the SLBs. Now, let's imagine one of these use of proceeds instrument, and in this case, a social bond or a sustainability bond, where part of the proceeds, or even 100 of the proceeds, will go to finance gender-related projects or SDG 5 related projects. If this is the intention of the issuer of this instrument, then this should be highlighted in the framework that the issuer will put in place before the issuance. We at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, actually, we looked at some of these intentions. So we looked at some of these issuances and we said, okay, we can actually define and identify those issuers who claim that their instrument or their issuance is gender-related or gender-focused. And we started to offer those issuers the possibility actually to have more visibility on our green exchange. So let's imagine there is a social bond issuer who decided that one of his social bonds will focus on gender-related projects. Then here we can call, let's say, the instrument a gender-focused bond. And this instrument, if it's listed on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and displayed on the green exchange, will receive extra visibility on our platform. Now you might ask me a question, but these are only the intentions of the issuers, right? I mean, how do you know that this is really what happened? Then here is the second part actually of the qualification for this instrument. And this is the most important part, because as you know, I might have as an issuer the best intentions in the world, but at the end, after the issuance, I might not commit to these intentions. So what we do at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, again, is that we follow on these intentions and we try to see in the post-issuance reporting if there was indeed an investment going to gender-related projects or to SDG number 5 or not. And only in this case, actually, the bond can be, let's say, tagged on our platform as a gender-focused bond. And I'm calling this instrument gender-focused bonds and not gender bonds because there is no rule that says it should be 100% of the proceeds invested in gender-related. You as an issuer, you might invest 70, 50, 30% of these proceeds in gender-related and the remaining in other social projects with no gender lens, let's say. So this is enough actually to qualify your bond for gender-focused bonds. Now, we can definitely see in the market 100% gender-focused bond, and this is one of the case studies that I will talk about later on. So the idea for us to qualify social and sustainability bonds, use of proceeds bonds in general, including green, by the way, because in some green projects, we have also some impact related to SDG number 5. We need to look at the reporting and to make sure that there was indeed a contribution to SDG number 5. So this is one case. Now, if we look at the other case, the other instrument that we have in the market, which is the non-use of proceeds instrument the sustainability linked bond one. Also here, we can qualify those instruments as sustainability linked bond gender focused. How? For the ones who know how this instrument works by linking the proceeds to some sustainability targets that the issuing entity should reach at a certain point of time after the issuance of the bond. So let's imagine that you're issuing a sustainability-linked bond and you're saying that one of your sustainability targets after 5 or 6 or 10 years will be linked to gender related issue. For instance, to increase the number of loans you provide to women-owned businesses, or to increase the number of jobs for women, etc. These are just examples. So your sustainability-linked bond in this case can be qualified as a gender-focused SLB. But also here, similar to the use of proceeds instrument, we need to make sure that this is really what's happening, and it's not only the intention of the instrument issuer that they put actually in their frameworks. Also here, we look at the reporting, post-issuance reporting, and we make sure that there is actually an improvement on those KPIs, on those key performance indicators related to gender. And only here we can qualify this on our platform as a gender-focused sustainability-linked bond. I hope this was clear. It's a very quick, actually, presentation on how debt instruments in the market can contribute to gender equality. And here I have some case studies for you. So let's start with maybe the first one, coming from a bank in Africa, in Tanzania, not that far from Kenya. And I'm sure that most of you have heard about. It's NMB Bank, who has issued the very first gender bond, or gender-focused bond, actually, in Africa, dedicated 100% to women businesses. And I would like to ask Tiffany maybe to play the video so we can better understand the case. Thank you, Tiffany.
It's a commercial bank, Universal Commercial Bank, based in Tanzania, East Africa, that serves retail clients, corporate clients, and government. I'm the treasurer for the bank, so main responsibility really is around mobilizing funds, so liquidity management, foreign exchange risk management, interest risk management, and coordination, just to make sure that there's balance sheet optimization, and as well as capital allocation. So our gender bond really is a use of proceeds bond, that we issued in line with the international capital markets principles under the social bonds framework that allows us to raise money from the public and finance, women-owned businesses or enterprises that are dominantly owned by women, or businesses whose products and services actually eventually, service the female. Women proposition is a very important segment for our bank. And yes, we had a very fantastic proposition for women's savings, but we realized on the financing side, we needed to do something to mobilize additional funding to support growth for women-owned businesses. So we felt it was necessary for us, because a strategic fit for us is really to diversify portfolio. And given the risk profile of women as far as loans is concerned, we realized that the non-performing loans ratios are actually lower than that of the male counterparts. Yes, so the projects we tend to finance, or that we're financing with these, are predominantly female-owned enterprises, and it cuts across different sectors, be it renewable energy, agriculture, health, education, and manufacturing as well. Obviously, it would be interesting that we measure the number of new loans that are issued to MSCs, so micro to medium and small enterprises women. But also it will be interesting for us, and we're doing that, to measure what impact that is having on their social and economic life. So how many jobs are created? You know, are they growing? Are they not? Are they expanding their businesses? You know, I think those kind of metrics are very important, and it's part of our KPIs in ensuring that these funds actually put to the right use. Indeed, we've issued other types of bonds, retail bonds, corporate bonds. The difference with this gender bond is that the use of proceeds requires a lot of transparency. Investors require that you go back to them to tell them, you know, how these funds have been used. But in addition to that, it has to go in line with, you know, the social bond principles and in line with the international capital markets, you know, principle on social bonds. You know, as opposed to the other bonds that you could simply raise and finance all manner of activities, you know, without accountability to the investors. This requires significant accountability and transparency as far as investors are concerned. It was very well received by investors, domestic investors, and as well as international investors. As a matter of fact, it got 197% oversubscription. So we had significant appetite seeing from international financiers, but as well as domestic retail and corporate investors. I think one obvious one was the misconception, you know, that you have a gender bond in the market, you know, financing women, and therefore there was a perception that perhaps the bond subscribers were meant to be female, you know, and so it requires a lot of effort, marketing efforts, to ensure that the male counterparts actually understood that it's not just for female, but they could also invest to help advance female. You know, so that was a key challenge for us. But the other one is obviously data quality, especially in some of these emerging markets, still remains to be an issue. You know, so you need to capture the right data at onboarding stage becomes very important, because you really get to realize how critical that is when you're doing your impact measurement and reporting. But the other aspect is the opportunities are still huge. The financing gap for female generally is still quite huge, and that is why that is why there's need for us perhaps also to consider scaling up, you know, such insurances, you know, going forward. Yes, just related to the previous question. So we realize we need to do more still, you know. So certainly we need to raise more funding. You know, be it domestically, be it partnering with DFIs or developing financial institutions, to just make sure that we can scale up, you know, that portfolio. The need is there. I think we need to answer a very critical question of affordability, which keeps coming up, and hopefully using things like guarantee schemes from some of these development financial institutions will enable us actually affordably extend credit to female entrepreneurs. I think critical for me, again, back to what I've said, is data, you know, at the onboarding stage. You need to get it right. But at the same time, just ensuring that indeed you have a pipeline sufficient enough to be covered whatever amount of bonds you want to raise, because ultimately investors demand, you know, that level of transparency and accountability to see that these bonds are actually put to the intended use.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for playing the video. I will go back to my slides. I still have like 2 or 3 slides with you. I hope this case study was interesting. It's a concrete case study, and it was a huge success. Maybe some of you have followed the story of an NB bank, and actually they came back to the market with another agenda bond just a few months ago, with another Jaziri bond. Actually, it was very interesting. These bonds, by the way, are listed or double listed on the local stock exchange in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and also on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and the Luxembourg Green Exchange under the specific tag of the gender-focused bond of the Luxembourg Green Exchange. And this dual listing actually is very important for such innovative issuances coming from emerging economies, where actually they tackle dedicated or specific let's say issues related to the local context, and it's important to make them visible on the international level, because if they are local issuances, they will stay known only on the local level. But actually the intention of any issuer, and this was the case with an NB bank, is to go international and to get international investors' interest in these bonds, and to attract international investors to Tanzania. The gentleman mentioned the oversubscription thing, which is again a signal of the appetite for this type of instrument in the local, but also on the international market. And again, they came back to the market with another gender bond, which means that the market was still waiting for that instrument. He focalized also on the reporting and on the data. And this is a very important point. Again, any issuer should really focus on this since the beginning, before the issuance itself, and not to leave it until the reporting. You need really to focus on what type of data you will collect and how you will report on it. So your metrics and your objectives in this case. What to say? Maybe, well, you can look at the slide. I just try to summarize a little bit what was written on this slide, and maybe we can go to another case study. And this time the case study is on the sustainability linked bond, gender focused ones. We don't have a video, but I have a very interesting case study coming from an entity. Equity AB Group, coming from Stockholm, from Sweden, who raised a sustainability-linked bond, or who issued a sustainability-linked bond in 2021 with 10 years tenure. And this bond is not a use of proceed. This bond is a sustainability-linked bond, and two of the targets, sustainability targets, let's say, are linked to gender-related matters. One of them, they wanted to increase the percentage of women in the as investment advisory professionals to become 28% by 2026 compared to 21% in 2020. And the second sustainability gender-related target is they have, or they wanted also to increase the percentage of women in the as board members within the portfolio of equities companies to 36% by 2026 compared to 21% in 2022. So you see here we have, maybe it's not maybe, they have other sustainability targets, but two of these sustainability targets were identified as gender related or woman related. And here you can see the differences between what type of targets, what type of objectives you would like to reach between, well, in this case, increase the number of women on the board level, or management related, let's say, while in some other cases we see it related directly to project finance. This bond has followed the International Capital Market Association Sustainability Linked Bond principles. So again, here we don't have dedicated principles for SLBs. And the criteria to qualify these as gender focused, as I said, at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange is the link to the sustainability target. The investors' reaction to this instrument, knowing that SLBs are quite new in the market, as you may know, now adding the layer of the gender on the top of SLB is even more, let's say, innovative. Let's put it like this. But so the reaction might not be predictable. However, the reaction in the market was great, because there was, again, an oversubscription from the investors who come actually from different angles. The importance when it comes to the sustainability-linked bonds in general, and in this case, gender-related, is how material the sustainability targets that you put to yourself as an issuer. And this was one of the main, actually, points in this sustainability-linked bond. These two targets were considered material to the entity, to the issuer within that group of issuers, and according to the external reviewer, actually, who confirmed their relevance and their materiality to equity. What to say? I hope I managed to, shed some lights on how concretely we use those instruments in the market to promote gender equity and gender equality. Regarding your question, we do at the Luxembourg Green Exchange, under our own academy, provide dedicated courses on gender-focused bonds. If you're interested, just get in touch with me, or just ask Tiffany, and she will put you in contact with me. And I'm happy to say that we have a dedicated study available on our website that was issued, well, now has been a little bit more than 1 year, but we're going to update this next year and to put it again on the website. But you can already look at the old one, which is publicly available, and you can also look at a couple of case studies that we've developed with UN Women. Well, here I mentioned 2 case studies, but we have more case studies listed on the Luxembourg Green Exchange, but gender focused. You can consult those ones both on our website and on the website of UN Women. And I will stop here. Thank you so much for your presence. Thank you, Tiffany, and all the team at UNSSE. And I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thanks, Paul. Maybe I'll just let you know that there has been a question in the Q&A about any gender-related bonds linked to Kenya. So if you had any thoughts on that, that would be great.
Well, I see that someone already answered that no, there are no
great.
gender-focused bonds in Kenya. And to my knowledge, yes, there are not. But I know that there are some entities who are interested actually in following the example of Tanzania in issuing some. I cannot reveal who they are, but we work closely with some entities in Kenya, and hopefully soon there will be something in the market.
Great. So everyone should keep their eyes open. We're hopefully going to see something soon. Great. Thanks so much, Paul. We really appreciate you joining and sharing that expertise. It's very helpful for our participants to see how this works in practice.
Thank you so much.
Now, I don't want to prevent anyone from getting their break. So I'm just going to very quickly take us through this last unit, which is looking at, sorry, I went too fast, but it's looking at here, what are the market mechanisms that we're talking about? Now, we already covered a lot of these, so I think you'll be quite familiar with them. But in terms of promoting market participation, we're actually seeing this on both the sell side and the buy side. Now, what do I mean by the sell side? Here, we're talking about really promoting products and participation from women-led businesses and female entrepreneurs. So really looking at what exactly are those companies that we're investing in, those products we're investing in, and are they ensuring kind of equality within their own organizations, as well as ensuring that we're giving equal opportunity to participation in markets from companies that are being listed or from products that are being listed. Now, we also see this from the buy side, though. So when we talk about who's buying this, we're talking about traders a lot of the time. And there's a lot of support looking at as we enhance the equality on the buy side of investors and traders, we actually see more diversity in the products we're investing in. So the more women traders we have, the more women products and women businesses we see invested in. So really trying to see that throughout the whole investment supply chain. Now, some examples that you might want to look into is in the sell side is IFC's Sourcing to Equal. This is an IFC-led initiative in partnership with the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative and the Norwegian government. And we can share a link to that in the chat for you. And then also from the buy side, a really interesting example from South Africa is the Johannesburg Stock Exchange does the JSE She Invest Summit, which a number of stock exchanges are doing now, which are really helping women to get involved in investing and in markets from the buy side. Now, we also see markets are promoting not just inclusion, but also impact. So what we mean here is companies and products that, as Paul was explaining, have a real impact on gender equality. So here we see this happening through product promotion, such as incentives, maybe that's decreased listing fees or awards to really highlight those companies that are doing a really good job. But we also see that through segments and indices to make it easier to find these products and these companies. And just as a reminder, we did look at indices last time, so I won't go over this. We had a great presentation from Harriet Bloomberg yesterday to kind of explain how indices work. But just to note that they're all, fairly different. They all have their own, secret sauce. But what they do or should do is really show a real breadth of information, really dive into this topic to get all those areas we've been talking about. today. So before we go to our break, a quick Zoom poll, our first one for the day. Another little quiz for you. Why are investors looking for gender-related opportunities? Is it for higher financial performance? Is it to access untapped markets? Is it to enhance climate-related impacts of investments? Is it to prevent men from accessing leadership positions, or is it to diversify their portfolios? What do you think based on what we've discussed so far? And I'll just give you 5 seconds to fill that in so that you can start your break. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm happy to see that none of you fell for the little trap in that quiz. Yeah, all of those are indeed correct. There's many reasons that investors are interested in these products. All of those listed except for preventing men from accessing leadership positions. That is certainly not why these products are being developed. And actually, if that is the intention, then it's not really looking for equality. Keeping in mind that when we're talking about equality here, we're not meaning just moving women up. A lot of times we have to focus on women to be able to even out that balance, but the objective is not to, swing the ball in the other direction. Great. So with that, we are now just 5 minutes past our halfway point, or 10 minutes, sorry, past our halfway point. And I'd love to give you all a break now. So take 5 minutes, do a quick stretch, grab yourself a coffee or tea, and then we'll continue on. Enjoy.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed a little refresh in the break there. Ready to go into a bit more content and learn a few more things. So we're now going to be moving on to look at, we've looked at some of the financial instruments, and so now we're going to be moving on to look at how an organization can communicate their performance on gender equality, which could be one means of accessing those gender-specific financing mechanisms that we talked about earlier by communicating actively on what they're doing. So it's not only important for communicating with investors, however, but also internal communication is really key to ensure that culture change really takes place within the organization. And of course, as we've talked about already, changing corporate culture is a huge part of the challenge here. So, communications has a massive role to play in that. So there'll be two main sections we'll be talking about within this unit. Transparency with your internal stakeholders, and in particular your employees, and also with your external stakeholders. So to start with, let's look at how you can manage effective internal communication. So there are many methods used to enhance transparency within an organization. And what we want to highlight today is the Gender Equality Action Plan as a tool for communicating with internal stakeholders. So to guide us through this, we're very pleased to have Esther with us from UN Women, as Tiffany introduced at the start of the session. So thank you very much for joining us, Esther, and I'd like to hand over to you now, who's going to be talking a little bit more about the WEPs and putting them to action in this area. Thanks, Esther.
Thanks, Fiona, and hello to everyone who has joined this session today. I want to pick up from our presentation on Monday, where we introduced you to the women's empowerment principles. And today our focus is just going to be on how to use the principles to set or to come up with your action plan for gender equality in your organization. And of course, linking that to how you can approach your internal communications. I know a lot is always said around public communications, the public disclosures that we need to make, but during this segment, we'll just focus entirely on how to engage our internal stakeholders to ensure that they're also on board when we are creating our gender action plans and also implementing them. So it's important to note that gender equality, the roles and responsibilities around gender equality do not sit with one individual or one department in organizations. They sit with many people across different departments, and bringing all these stakeholders on board, getting their views, their concerns and expectations is very important when you're creating your gender action plan. And using the roadmap, the framework, the women's empowerment principles that we discussed on Monday, we actually have a tool that companies can use to curate efficient and practical gender action plans within their companies. And that's what I will be introducing to you today. This tool is called the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis Tool, and it has 4 thematic areas of assessment. It looks at women in leadership, or how women, of course, are taking up and participating in management and leadership roles in an organization. It also looks at general workplace policies around gender equality and marketplace policies around, marketing, procurement, your supply chain engagement on gender equality. And lastly, on how a company is engaging with community on gender equality matters. So that tool actually has a set of 18 questions that can guide a company in assessing their gender equality performance in order to actually identify gaps for action going forward. So the essence of having a gender action plan is ideally to correct your past and also present forms of gender inequality within your policies, processes, and systems, and ensuring that you prevent such inequalities from happening again in the future. At the same time, it also ensures that you as a company is putting in place the right strategies, policies, and programs that are gender responsive and transformative in nature. Then again, it will also help you as a company to deepen your understanding of gender equality, not just you, but also with your internal stakeholders as well as your external stakeholders, ensuring that everyone is on the same page with the same understanding of your gender equality goals and targets and are working towards achieving that. Then lastly, your gender action plan should be able to enable you track progress, real-time progress of, where you stand in terms of gender equality, various aspects of gender equality, and also report on how you're achieving your long-term goals and targets that you set for yourselves. So this is basically the roadmap we're going to talk about today. And like I mentioned earlier, it's grounded on the Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis tool that you can actually access on the WEP's website to help you identify your gaps and also guide you in your action planning. Next slide, please. So as we prepare to create and develop our gender action plans, we have just simple steps that you can follow to guide you in this process. They may look challenging and complicated, however, with the understanding and also with the tools that we provide you, that are also available on our website, you're able to actually go through this process seamlessly. So the first step in creating your gender action plan is to actually establish your overall goals in terms of gender equality. When we talk about goals here, we mean your overall objectives in terms of gender equality. Are you, for example, trying to reduce, inequality within the workplace, or are you trying to achieve gender equality within your supply chain? And your goals should be as broad as possible so that then you're able to feed into, you have different initiatives that can feed into achieving that goal. So defining your goal is very important. And in defining your goal, it's also important that you understand your context of engagement, of your operation, so that you also get to know your, issues, gender equality issues that then you need to address and that you also need to pay attention to when designing the goals. Then ideally, the goals should also align with your overall business strategy and also embedded in your strategic business model, so that you also know how to scope when you start implementing activities in order to achieve those goals. Then the second step would be to create measurable create measures, initiatives, and activities that will enable you to implement your objectives and also attain your goals. So ideally here is coming up with the specific activities or initiatives that then will enable you bridge the gap that you shall have established between your current performance and the goal that you want to attain. And it's important to note that using the tool that I just mentioned, it can guide you in identifying the specific activities or actions that then you can take to bridge those specific gaps. Then thereafter, you need to set a baseline. And the baseline here is all about knowing how you're performing at the moment, your current performance, your baseline performance, and also, just assigning numeric, performance or data to how you're performing in gender equality in general. So that baseline performance will enable you to track progress and monitor how you're improving over a period of time towards achieving your goals. Then after establishing your baseline performance, it would be important for you to set clear targets and timelines. So targets here will be now the difference you intend to make over a period of time towards achieving your broader goal. So in this case, targets should be very, data-driven, should be evidence-based, and should be very specific so that you're able to stay on course in achieving your goal. Then again, assign timelines to them, because then the timelines will enable you to, monitor milestones over a period of time to ensure that you actually stay on course. Then lastly, it would be important to appoint responsible people even at the leadership level, that can take ownership of your gender equality goals, then also assign different roles and responsibilities to various initiatives in various departments, levels of management, to ensure that there's accountability and monitoring of progress and results as you implement your action plan. So those would be the simple, steps that you would take in developing your action plan. It's important to note that target setting should be very, specific, should be data-driven, should also be evidence-based, and should have clear timelines, which then should be communicated to everyone internally so that they're able to work towards that goal. Next slide, please. So yeah, things like I was mentioning, things that you need to consider when setting your goal, gender equality goal, is to ensure that it's as specific as possible. And when it is specific, then it is clear to everyone what they are expected to do or what the vision is, then they're able to work towards it. Then again, make sure that you can measure progress towards that goal over time. So that's why I was saying that you need to have your data around it, and having data will enable you to also just monitor progress, because then you have something you're monitoring. You have metrics or figures that you looking at over a period of time, rather than just having broad and blanket goals. Then make sure it is also realistic and attainable. However, it is also important that it is also as ambitious as possible. And ambitious here means that it should align with the global gender equality targets, so that you're also working towards achieving the same, we're all working towards the same goal, so that you don't lag behind with your targets. So look at global targets. I know UN Women has over 70 indicators when it comes to gender equality, and you could use those to actually set your ambitious targets, which are realistic, but at the same time attainable. Then ensure that your goals are also relevant to your organization. And here, relevance, we mean ensuring that the ambitions or the visions of the top management also align with the middle management. Most of the times you find that companies actually have goals that have been approved at the top management level, but then they are not very practical, especially when they're being delivered by the middle management. Then now you start having, conflict in achieving them, and also driving, targets. So ensure that you align, and this is why internal communication is important. Bringing all these people on board and actually involving them in setting the targets is key, so that everyone's opinion and thoughts are taken into consideration at the very beginning of designing of the targets. And then now it will also be easier for you during implementation. So relevance to your company, and not just to highest level of management, but also to the middle level management, and everyone in the company is very key. Then lastly is the timelines for achieving those goals. Be specific. I know, for example, like the SDG 5 as a timeline of 2030. You can also use that to set your specific, milestones and timelines on the various thematic gender equality issue areas that you want to, take actions on, but ensure the timelines are there so that you stay on track and monitor progress. Next slide, please. Yeah, so again, ensure that your targets are supported by practical implementation guidelines. So these guidelines, of course, we have various studies that have been, conducted that gives you clear guidelines and even indicators on how to approach some of these targets. So just ensure that you are conversant with, what's happening around you, and set targets that are actually speaking to where everyone globally is trying to drive change in. Communicate your targets regularly to employees and stakeholders, ensuring that they are aware of the action plan. So internal communication and involvement of stakeholders is very key, because as you roll out these action plan. Remember, I mentioned earlier that these responsibilities do not sit with one person. You'll be counting on these people to actually take actions and implement the action plan. So involving them in the creation, communicating with them regularly to get feedback on what is working, what is not working, where to improve, where to adjust targets and timelines is very important so that your action plan also stays live and adequate. Then again, ensure that you share progress on implementation in your company's ESG or sustainability report. So this is where I was talking about the external communications, the public disclosures that I think we'll be discussing in the next segment. So of course, there are those frameworks that already specify the specific gender equality disclosures that we need to make in our sustainability reports. But maybe not everything. So as a company, if you have additional indicators that you also want to communicate, ensure that you communicate those publicly, because then even your internal stakeholders also have access to the same reports, and then they're able to monitor how you're performing and also, course correct where necessary. And lastly, engagement of internal and external stakeholders. So it's important that you actually have questions that enable you get the right information from your stakeholders in terms of what their needs are, what their expectations are. Then again, maybe the kind of support you could get from them. Ensure you also have a schedule for regular engagement and also have modes of engagement that is also suitable to these stakeholders. Whether it is emails, it's one-on-one meetings or barazas, you need to define that clearly so then you're able to get you the feedback the right way and in a manner that will add value to your action planning. Next step, slide.
I think that was
So
your
I think
final...
that marks the end of it. Just to conclude, the tool that I've referenced to is available on the website. You can access it there. The presentation I've also made is one of the modules we have on the website on how to, create a gender action plan. It's one of the learning modules on the website. So you can also log in there, take the module, and it will guide you on how to go about the process. However, the UN Women Country Office, Kenya Country Office is also available to support you in this process as we move along. So thank you so much, and back to you, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Esther, for that really comprehensive overview of those resources. That's super useful. Lovely. So we've covered there a lot on the internal communication side, of course, and we've got a really good action plan that we can use to support us in developing our internal communications. We'll now be moving on to say a little bit about external disclosures and disclosure to your external stakeholders. I will say that I'm very keen to make sure we have time for our guest speaker, Sweta. So I may be covering some of this material a little quickly, but it's all available in the handout materials. So we'd encourage you as well to look at some of that detail after the session as well, if you'd like to know a bit more on these topics. But to get us started, it would be really useful for us just to get a sense in the next poll of what your organization is currently doing in terms of any gender-related disclosures. So here the question is does your company disclose gender-related information through one or more of these mechanisms? So select any that are relevant for you. And of course, it's totally fine if you're not reporting at the moment, but if you are reporting, do you do so in a standalone sustainability report, in your annual financial report, perhaps in a gender pay gap specific disclosure, or maybe a combination of these? So I'll just give you a quick second to respond. We'll make it quite quick fire again, like our last poll. So maybe just give you another 5 seconds or so, if that's okay. I see lots of you have been able to respond already, so thanks for being so prompt. And we will close out there, as I said, rapid fire. Brilliant. So it looks like we've got a bit of a split, but there are quite a lot of you that are putting this information into your sustainability reports at the moment. Some in the financial reports as well, quite a few. No one's publishing a separate gender pay gap report. and some people are not reporting at the moment. So quite a mixed picture, and that's really useful to understand. And so we'll talk a little bit more now about some of those different publications and where you might want to disclose. So who you communicate with is really a key determinant in where you should report and what standard you use to do so. So we've talked a lot about investors so far in this session and kind of helping to access investment products through better reporting. So to report to your investors, the real location that you should be focusing your disclosure on for gender will be in your annual report. And here, the International Sustainability Standards Board, which is this IFRS foundation you see here, has consolidated the major investor-oriented sustainability disclosure standards. So if you're looking to report to your investors, this IFRS International Sustainability Standards Board is where you should be looking. And then on the right-hand side, we have the GRI standards, which you can use to report to a broader range of stakeholders. These are already in use by many organizations globally. And so in a combined way, these two sets of standards form a holistic reporting package to allow you to report to a wide range of stakeholders. In the interests of time, I'll skim past this, but it just provides you a little breakout of what that information is that you put in the different reporting locations. So if we talk a little bit more about these ISSB standards that I've just mentioned here. So this is for reporting to investors, as I've said, and it requires disclosure across 4 broad content areas that if you've reported under the TCFD on climate in the past, you might be familiar with. So the ISSB S1 standard on sustainability-related financial disclosure requires you to disclose information about all sustainability risks and opportunities that could be reasonably expected to affect your entity's cash flows or access to finance over the short, medium, or long term. So here we're talking about issues that we think are potentially financially material. So if that would apply for gender-related risks and opportunities in your organization, this would be the standard to use. And so although there aren't gender-specific reporting requirements under these standards yet, they do recommend following this structure here for all topics and to use the SASB and GRI standards to help provide particular topic disclosures on gender. And then, as we've mentioned, the GRI is a multi-stakeholder reporting framework. We went through this and actually have pulled out some of the key aspects of GRI that can support you in gender-related reporting. In particular, the requirements on employee disclosures, breaking those down by gender, on your governance structures and composition and your female-male splits there, any policy commitments that you might have related to gender issues, and your approach, of course, to stakeholder engagement. So here you can see the numerical references to the different aspects of the GRI standards, where you can find further information to help you with those reporting elements. And so we will just skip past this, but the GRI also provides some further resources, which we've highlighted here that you may want to look at. And then, apologies, I'm zooming along, but we have a couple of examples here of some company disclosures against those different content areas of governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets that I mentioned for ISSB. So we'll leave you to have a look at those reporting examples in the slide handout, but you can find the link to each company's report in these materials if you want to take a further look at what they're reporting at the moment on gender. And then, as well as those standards we discussed, there's also some additional information that your organization can look to for more guidance on this topic. So there's the UN, the guiding principles, such as the UN Charter on Human Rights, the Sustainable Development Goals, or of course, the Women's Empowerment Principles, as we've talked a lot about today. But also, of course, it's important to make sure you're aware of any legal requirements in terms of disclosure, and also that you look at other kinds of standards. So for example, you may want to look to ISO standards, such as the ISO 26000 guidance on social responsibility. And in various other ISO standards, you see elements of gender equality cropping up as well. And then finally, you may want to also look at ratings and benchmarks. So for example, you might look to the World Benchmarking Alliance, and also you might want to consider other ratings such as the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, which Harry talked to us about in the last session. Okay, so with that, I'd like to hand over to Sveta from Brightmine, who joins us to talk a little bit more about pay ratios between men and women. So thanks very much for joining us, Sveta, and over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. I think I need the permission to share my screen as well.
Yes, I think hopefully Tiffany can just give you that in the background. That should pop up for you soon.
Sorry, Sweta, I thought, oh, you already are. Are you logged in twice?
No, I don't think so.
You are a co-host. Maybe I'll withdraw your co-host and I'll try to give it to you again and see if that works.
Let me try. I think something just popped up now.
Yes, we're seeing that come up now. There we are.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you both. Hi, everyone. I'm Shweta Vishwanathan. So I'd like to start off by thanking the UN SSE initiative, specifically Kenya Stock Exchange, Tiffany and Fiona, for providing me with this opportunity. So I work as a global product specialist or solution specialist for pay equity analytics solution within LexisNexis, which sits under the parent company RELX. So this pay equity analytics solution was previously called GapSquare. So just to give you an overview, in this role, I provide subject matter expert in how our solution can actually help solve pay equity issues within organizations to ensure that they're an inclusive employer. So I also educate teams internally on pay equity, and along with that, collaborate with teams for product improvement. In terms of the client base, I support global clients, but specifically focusing on legislation in the UK, US, and EU. And I also educate clients on best practices globally to build a fairer future work. So that's a little bit about me. But in terms of what we're going to cover today, now that we've spent time assessing the foundation of gender equality and how regulation, reporting, and stakeholder demands underscored the need to take on this work, we now want to understand tangible actions that you can analyze and communicate to internal and external stakeholders, as it was mentioned in this session earlier. So you can think about driving progress around pay equity, which, as discussed previously, is the means to achieve broader gender equality. And as Esther mentioned as well, you need data to track progress. What we'll discuss now is how you can track that progress and what sort of process you can have in place for it, with specific examples. So really, the first step is to evaluate your starting point. So what that really means is this is defined in phases. Phase 1 is pre-assessment, so identifying your starting point. Phase 2 is the assessment phase, the actual assessment of execution of the pay equity study. And phase 3 is post-assessment, which is when you think about remediation, adaptation, and how to be sustainable when it comes to defining metrics. So if we start with phase 1, so here in this case, looking at a single scenario may also present something that might sound unreachable to many organizations, so given where they are and where they might be getting started. So what we have done with these slides is sort of give you an understanding of how you can start, irrespective of where you are in your pay equity journey. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming work as well. I'll discuss how certain metrics or certain considerations can help you achieve that. So like I said, for many, just getting started might be the biggest hurdle. And you're not alone in that space, because 24% of HR professionals actually report that the lack of a clear job architecture or leveling frameworks is a big factor that holds back the pay program communication. So not having clear job leveling framework sometimes is quite an issue. So in terms of phase 1, what we want to think about is four key pillars: pay philosophy, motivation, stakeholder alignment, and understand how you think about assessing your pay gaps or comparing like-for-like work and equal work for equal value. So like I said, often we do hear lack of data as a barrier to progress, but in reality, any data is a starting point. And determining job architecture and leveling by defining roles for like value is the most important theme here. And for you to understand where your starting point is and the data you may need to improve over time. So like any other business strategy, it's critical that all stakeholders are aligned, as was discussed in the session previously as well, on intended outcomes, and resources need to ensure this work is carried out authentically. So this does not mean that every pay gap or every gap will be closed overnight, and that you'll need millions of dollars in resources to start. So this is where these metrics are quite crucial. So applying these metrics and key performance indicators to ensure that you're actually building a practical, achievable milestone for progress. So metrics like defining clear timelines, owners, ensuring compliance and regulatory needs and resource allocation. We should be aware, however, to ensure that it doesn't become a tick box exercise where these metrics are reported for the sake of reporting, but rather identify and evaluate the outcomes of these metrics to have a positive impact on the workforce. So that's a little bit around the pre-assessment phase of phase one. Now, actually thinking about the assessment. So when it comes to running the actual analysis based on what you want to calculate, such as gender pay gap or pay inequities or pay equity analysis, 55% of business leaders across the US and UK say that the complexity of pay equity analysis serves as their top barrier. So thankfully, there are a number of tools and technologies. One example is the Brightmind Pay Equity Analytics, committed to increasing efficiencies, removing room for human error and dependency on unreliable spreadsheets. So irrespective of the level of data that you have, doing this on a solution rather than manual calculations always makes the process a little bit more risk-free. So this will help, again, inform methodology and analysis confidence so your teams can actually focus on truly understanding the key drivers of gaps within the organization. So this root cause analysis will actually help you inform the prioritization of manageable incremental steps that we've spoken about. Now, again, in terms of metrics here, thinking about having gap ranges and goals, remediation timelines, clear remediation timelines, and realistic timelines, actually, gap intervals for risk employees, compliance, and reporting requirements. So all of these considerations in this assessment phase will really help you prioritize your effort and goals. So that's a little bit around phase two. Now, phase three is the post-assessment phase. So this is where we're thinking about implementation and actually sustaining the progress that you are making as an organization. And pay equity work, like I said, cannot be treated as one and done exercise. Usually, once you have the assessment done, let's assume there is a pay gap of 30% within an organization or 20%, it does take a long time to reduce those pay gaps, but and it cannot be done just within a short period of time, which is why this phase becomes really important, because you need to sort of track this progress over time and be realistic in terms of what is achievable and not. So this post-assessment, aside from immediate needs for remediation, it's actually critical to ensure that you address potential root causes of pay gap by enhancing policies and procedures to ensure inclusive culture that can address the individual needs of employees. So similar to what was mentioned before, I think in difference of opinion between management and employees, research actually suggests that employees report only a third of managers, so 35% have effective conversations with their teams, and nearly 22% do not have conversations with their teams at all. And for few that do, these discussions are ineffective or very ineffective, which is about 20%. So the stats are not promising, but we can make progress. So just having a clear understanding of pay-making decisions not only helps inform pay equity strategies, but also helps arm managers with data and information needed to communicate effectively with their employees. So this sustain and scale pillar here is arguably the most critical in this space, as mentioned already. This cannot be treated as one and done exercise. So it's important to understand that progress is a journey and just getting started is the most important piece. So perfection should not act as the enemy of good. And in terms of metrics here, again, there are a few that we need to think about. First is actually immediate remediation needs. What do they look like and how can you achieve that, and having metrics around that. And then tracking the efficacy of policy changes. So once you have identified long-term policy changes that can be applied to reduce pay inequities, actually tracking the efficacy of those metrics as well, but also the policy changes. So, and then addressing representation goals. So this is where I said, if you're thinking about gender pay gap, for example, addressing those representation goals, you can have clear metrics around that to help you. And then the last piece that sort of covers everything is tracking progress of closed gaps over time as well. So what has worked well and what hasn't, based on exactly the nitty-gritties of within each organization, really. So that's a few metrics that you can consider for this space. So I hope this has provided you an overview of how pay equity work looks like for organizations undertaking this work. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to discuss this further. Thanks again to all the participants for attending this training and all the facilitators for an informative session. Back to you, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Sweta. We really appreciate that time you've taken to really use the data to bring this challenge to life. And I think it shows very well how it helps us to both understand the extent of the challenge and also really target the action we want to take as well. So we really appreciate you bringing that lens to the session. So that brings us to the end of the kind of content we'll be covering today. But as we wrap up, I wanted to have a think back on the question we asked you earlier in the session regarding your level of comfort with these different learning objectives that we set out to achieve. So it'd be really helpful if you could just take a second to reflect together on, where do you think you're now at against those different areas? So you have the different kind of 3 areas, and I see we've got someone who's responded already. So just take a second. Do you feel that you are now in a better shape in terms of being able to identify the value that gender equality can bring to investment strategies, to communicate gender-related information to investors, and to explain to colleagues the financial value of gender equality? So where do you think you might be at now? So we have our first respondents who both look like they now feel much more comfortable, or maybe they were the ones who were already comfortable, not sure, but already looking quite comfortable. So that's great. And we'll just see if we have anyone else give a view on that. Okay, I see a few more responses coming through, but generally it looks like we're all overall coming out on the higher end of the scale now in terms of our understanding in these areas. So that's brilliant to see that improvement. All right. A few more responses tipping in, and still, a little bit of a spread. And of course, we recognize that in a two-hour sessions, we can take you so far, but of course, it's just stage 1 often of the learning journey. So we'd really encourage you to continue to look at the resources that we have shared. So as we've mentioned in the chat, if you go to our webpage, all of the resources we've talked about today are included in a summary links at the bottom of the slide presentation. There's a kind of a full set that's structured against all of our modules. So please make sure to check that out if you'd like to learn more and focus on particular topics. But that's great to see. We feel a little bit more comfortable overall on these issues. Okay, so we'll go back then to our presentation and just wrap up to kind of recap really on some of those resources that can support you in your learning journey. Great, thank you. So as we've mentioned, we have the slide handouts, we have the guest speakers who've very graciously shared various resources with you as well. So please check out their handouts on our webpage, and indeed some further academic publications if you'd like to dig into this further. And then the training sessions from both today and earlier in the week will both be available to download view from our webpage in the next day or so. So please look out for those and feel free to share them with your colleagues as well, if you'd like to get them clued in on this topic as well. So as I think we've seen, and just to highlight, these are the sort of hyperlinks that you'll find. I know we're getting some questions about having these summarized in all one place. So this is all available in the slide pack, nicely structured. So please take a look at that in your own time. And we've had a few questions, I know, regarding the feedback survey, which Tiffany is just sharing the link to now in the chat. So if you fill out this feedback survey, firstly, obviously, we'd love to know what you thought of the session and any areas we might be able to continue to build on in the future. But also, we'd really like to offer our appreciation to you all for joining us in the session. So as a token of that appreciation, if you complete that feedback survey, you will receive your completion certificate for participating in the training. Please note it can take you up to 5 days to get those certificates out to you, 5 working days. So please be patient, but you will receive that certificate shortly after filling out the survey. And of course, just to end on some final thanks. So we're really grateful for all of you for joining us here today, and to the IFC, UN Women and Columbia University for giving us their support and input to this programme. And then, of course, our particular thanks to all of our guest speakers who've joined us in the session to really add colour and life to this topic from their different perspectives. So thank you firstly to Paul for bringing that fantastic lens on the financial side, to Seta for bringing that great data lens that she also brought as well. And also to, apologies, we don't have a slide here, but very much thank you as well to the UN Women team, and that side of things has been fantastically covered by Esther as well. So really appreciate Esther's input there, and to the UN Women for their fantastic input to this programme. So finally, just to say our overall thanks to the SSE supporters who support us in delivering this programme alongside the IFC, UN Women and Columbia University, as I've mentioned, as well as the government of Luxembourg. And then, of course, we would really like to thank the Nairobi Stock Exchange and Securities Exchange for bringing us all together and hosting us for this session. It's been fantastic to have you all joining us, and we really hope to see you on a future training session again. So please do keep an eye out for those, and it would be great to have you along again. So we'll close out the session there, but thank you all so much for your time, your engagement in the session, and your continued focus on this topic within your own organisations as well. So wishing you the best of luck with that continued journey on gender equality, and thanks again.
And sorry, Fiona, maybe we can just pass to Demi quickly.
Oh, my apologies.
No worries.
Yes. Apologies, Demi. So we have, of course, Demi joining us from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So we do have a last couple of minutes here. So that's good timing to Demi just to hand over and say a final few words from your perspective. So thank you very much, Demi, as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined. Good afternoon. It has been an absolute pleasure to host Kenya's Gender Equality and Global Markets Workshop in partnership with IFC, UN Women, SSE Initiative, and the Columbian University. To all those who've joined, thank you so much for dedicating your time to be part of this workshop. We truly hope that you've gained valuable insights, and we look forward to hosting you at more workshops. So that's me to close it off. And then, of course, thank you to all the speakers and panelists who've helped bring this initiative through. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.